I'm Tammy Haddad, and this is Washington Insider. Thank you for joining us. We're talking with April Ryan, the White House correspondent for American Urban Radio Networks for almost 30 years. April has covered 3 presidents and is the author of The Presidency in Black and White. She hosts the daily feature, The White House Report, which is broadcast to nearly 475 affiliated stations nationwide, and is the first and only daily national radio feature broadcast directly from the White House. She was elected in 2011 and served a 3-year term on the board of the prestigious White House Correspondents Association, and is one of only 3 African Americans in the association's 97-year history to serve on their board. April Ryan, it's so great to be with you. You're one of my favorite White House correspondents, but forget me, your favorite of all these presidents, and you put this book together, The Presidency in Black and White, my up-close view of 3 presidents and race in America, a very, very bold statement in this book. But I want to start with the first president and your first days as a White House correspondent.
My first days as a White House correspondent, they were unbelievable days. I never thought or imagined that I could be in this magnificent place of history, a place of change. 5 generations removed from the last known slave in my family, knowing that this place was built by slaves, and to question a president, oh my God, I never thought it. And I used to ask my late mother when she was alive, I said, did you ever imagine that I would be at the White House? She said, I knew you would do something great in Washington, but never at the White House. So it kind of blew my socks off and my family's socks off, and it's been an amazing ride.
And who were you working for? Who tapped you on the shoulder and said, come be our White House correspondent?
I got the call from American Urban Radio Networks, and they asked me to come to Washington to work in Washington as their bureau chief. And they hid the secret that I would be coming in as the White House correspondent. And when I found out that I was going to be the White House correspondent, I thought I was going to lose my mind. I was like, I can't do this job. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so big. And I'm someone who is not a part of the Washington establishment. I came from personality radio, local radio, but I guess all politics is local. So that's how I had to look at the White House. It was local to the extent that it touched every locality. And it was on a bigger spectrum. So it was a very different experience for me.
And so the first day you walk in and you walk down the steps to the basement.
When I first walk in to see the briefing room, I was in shock because I thought it was going to be this pristine, glamorous, beautiful place. And it was a place that was somewhat raggedy.
Pigsty comes to mind?
Pigsty comes to the forefront of my mind. Newspapers all over the place, people just very casual in their approach there. I'm like, wait a minute, is this the White House that I see on TV? And then I went downstairs, oh my gosh, it was a hot mess. The walls were crumbling, plaster Paris was crumbling. You could see wire behind the plaster Paris. You could see holes in the wall. I walked into my little booth, oh my God, claustrophobics need not apply. My booth was like the size of 2 phone booths stuck together, and I could not believe it. The walls were this dingy yellow. They had aged. It was just, they were puckering.
What year was this?
This was 1997. The
President Clinton not taking care of the press?
Well, he took care of us in a lot of different ways with carnivals and things of that nature, but our housing was less than desirable.
And how did you work in such close quarters? Because you weren't alone down there, right? Who else was there in that section?
It's all a mosh of the press. On the sides and the cubicles, you would have the newspapers and magazines. In the booths, you would have radio, you would have TV. At that time, we didn't really have bloggers. That was a whole nother aspect later on. But it was a mosh pit, basically, of reporters. And we sat together. It's a friendly adversarial relationship between the press as well as the press against or with the White House. So we are all in the boat, but maybe not always together, if you understand what I'm saying.
Well, all the network reporters were upstairs in beautiful quarters, right? And you CNN was with you?
CNN was downstairs. No, they weren't. No, everyone did not have, we still don't have beautiful quarters. It is what it is, you know.
Well, they're functional, right?
Functional.
But barely functional.
Right.
So your book is titled The Presidency in Black and White. What year or when did black correspondents finally get to the White House to cover the presidency?
That happened over 70 years ago. There are stories.
But it was after women. Women got in
Yes,
first.
yes, white women. And then you had some other female reporters, Ethel Payne and Alice Dunnigan, who charted our history as female black reporters in the White House. But the first black reporter was Harry McAlpin, who came in, and the story is just so riveting, and it just sends chills through my body. He was told not to come into press conferences that included the white male reporters, and they felt that if he stepped on their foot, there would be a riot. Can you imagine? And I mean, it's tight quarters already. Yes, a riot. So that was over 70 years ago, and here we are in 2015, black president and a couple of black reporters later. We're working together. There have been no riots yet from anyone stepping on anyone's toes, but.
Well, I'd love for you to tell the story of President George W. Bush and a press conference.
The Kenyan president came to the United States because President Bush did not travel to Kenya on his Africa trip because of security issues at that time. Terrorist threats and things of that nature happening in Kenya. So President Bush wanted the president of Kenya to come to the United States, and he wanted to have a state visit, state dinner. He laid out the red carpet literally for him. With a state visit, there is a joint press conference. And I wanted to go because that is what I cover for American Urban Radio Network's urban minority issues and issues of countries of people of color. So I went looking for my seating in the East Room, and I am a White House correspondent, an American White House correspondent, and I didn't see my name on the White House correspondent side. And I was like,
So
wait a
are
minute.
there names on chairs? Is that how they do
their
it?
organization names or your name on the chair with a card. And I kept looking and looking. I said, wait a minute, there might be a mistake. And someone said, oh, you're over there on the other side. I was like, really? And the other side was the group of African journalists. Some of them had traveled with the president of Kenya, and others had come in from the Washington area or from around the country if they were reporting on the Kenya issues. And I found it very interesting to be placed with the Kenyan delegation of reporters. I am African American, meaning I am a descendant of Africa from somewhere in Africa, I don't know. I was not offended, but I was shocked. And
So you're saying the U.S. reporters are usually on one side, and then the
foreign
foreign
press
press
are
on
on the-
another
yeah.
side. But
Foreign
you're
press.
with the foreign press.
I was placed with the foreign press, the African press. And I was shocked, but I sat there. I didn't make a noise about it or cause a stink about it. And some of my white colleagues were like, what are you doing over there? I said, I was placed over here.
So you're basically under control of the White House press operation, right,
Yeah.
as a correspondent.
We're pretty much micromanaged. You know, you go here, you sit here, you do this. But they don't tell us what to say, but they place us where they want us for certain events. So President Bush and the Kenyan president come out to the podium, and the first thing he does, he scans the crowd as he does with his little laugh and his body movement. And he looks, and he sees me. And I look, I'm like, I know, I'm trying to make eye contact like I didn't do this. So 3 times within that press conference, he made it known that I was in the wrong seat. And it kind of overshadowed the press conference. And I'm like, oh gosh.
So was he saying you put yourself there? I mean,
Yeah, he
what
said,
was he
April,
saying?
what are you trying to do? You're trying to get the attention of the Kenyan president. And the Kenyan president wasn't even biting with me in that seat. So President Bush ultimately said, okay, go ahead. Because, I was in the seat, and he made such a big deal about it. And at the end, I was like, oh boy, this is kind of bad. And everybody was just kind of laughing, but it was kind of awkward. And so that evening, when we went back to the press office, I said to someone in the press office, I said, well, why would you put me there? I said, you should be thankful we thought of you to put you there. I was like, wow. It was just really...
Why did they say that? Just so that you would get because you got
because
a question?
I would be noticed, I guess, but I get noticed. I mean, all I have to do is raise my hand or call out. So, but I just thought it was just, they didn't know any better, I really think. And even Andy Card at the time, the chief of staff, said it was pretty bad. And I mean, for a president of the United States to call it out during a press conference 3 times, and then the Kenyan president didn't pick up on it, and the president himself, President Bush, had to call on me. It was kind of an interesting scenario, to say the least.
And did you see the president later? Did he ever mention it to
Yes,
you?
he did. He said he knew. He understood that he didn't do it. He said, but it was interesting. And we had a conversation about it. But I was actually a guest at the state dinner that night, so we did have a chance to talk about it. So, and that's why I heard Andy Card say that it was pretty bad. He and I have always had these running conversations about race and just running conversations about life in general. It wasn't anything for us to talk about it, but he just thought it was so odd, and so did I, and he pointed it out himself. So it was a very interesting scenario.
And when you wrote the book, I know you didn't get to talk to President Bush, but you interviewed him many times.
Yes.
What's your view on the Bush administration and race?
My view of President Bush may be different from a lot of African Americans. I don't think that President Bush was racist. A lot of people feel because of what happened with Katrina and some other issues, and the fact that this administration did not put in enough equity in the black community, meaning that the administration looked at the black community as a loss because they knew that they weren't going to get the attention and sympathy or understanding, whatever, from the black community. So they kind of chalked it off as a loss. That's one of the reasons why they didn't promote their trips to Africa and promote a lot of things they were doing in Africa. But because they did not do what they should have done with the African American community throughout their time, when Katrina hit, it hit hard, and it hit in the worst ways. And they were viewed in a different way because they did not build up that equity. I do not believe that the president is racist, even with that, but I do in the book give him an F for the deaths that happened from Katrina, and the fact that anytime a group of people feel disenfranchised from their country, that is a bad scenario. But I think that President Bush was caught up with Republican philosophy and ideology with Katrina states' rights, and that caused him to appear a certain way. And also some of the people that were around him, advising him, I believe that really played a bad hand for him.
Well, but he also was behind the PEPFAR, which saved millions of lives in Africa.
Lives, yeah. Not only that, the African Growth and Opportunity Act went through under him. Not only that, they worked on HIV, tuberculosis, malaria. They worked on a whole host of issues to help the people in Africa. And that was a big discussion at that time. Is it a national security issue versus just being a moral issue? Either way, I think it was both. And now, you know, after interviewing former First Lady Laura Bush for the book, she talked about it being a national security issue. At the time, President Bush didn't want to call it a national security issue, but Colin Powell did. But when you see a group of people who are dying from a disease and cannot stand up if there was some kind of issue, some kind of threat, or some kind of military action that needs to be taken, and you have a whole group of people who cannot really stand up for their country, that is a problem. And that's what Colin Powell was saying when he was deeming it a national security crisis.
President Clinton is considered the first African American president, or many people call him that. Do you agree?
Oh, Tammy.
Well, you wrote the book, my dear.
I know. I would say that Bill Clinton had many sensitivities that other presidents did not have to the African American community. He embraces that, and the African American community embraces him for embracing that. He is very sensitive, and he has a knowledge of the black community that a lot of people, a lot of white people don't. And he is every person. He's been poor, he's been in the black community as a kid. I consider him very sensitive to the community, and the community embraces him for that.
Well, you talked to him for the book.
Yes, I did.
He granted you an interview.
Yes, he did.
Recently. And what was his message? We are coming up on this campaign that his wife, Hillary Clinton, is going to run.
There was something very telling in this book that Bill Clinton said to me, and it was interesting. Mike McCurry, the former press secretary, even said, "I can't believe he told you that." I couldn't either. And it's something that kind of made me feel sad for him. He said, we had a soul food dinner for Bill Clinton, and that goes to the first black president kind of thing. We were talking about issues of race, and the black reporters at that time wanted to have an OTR, an off the record with the president, and many of the white reporters received those. And we were like, we want to have an OTR, and we were asking the administration for that, and the administration wanted the president to talk to us about race because he knew that we had some interesting concepts or ideas or just experiences that they would want to hear. So there was a melding of the minds, and both sides got what they wanted. And the president was very happy. He had collard greens, chicken.
Who made that?
My aunt made a large portion of it, and then, yes, my Aunt Pearl, and then a lot of us brought our own. It was kind of potluck. You can never do that
Potluck with the
yes,
president?
I know. You can never do that now. The Secret Service was on their job. They were taste testing and watching my aunt make it, and they were taste testing the
Did
stuff.
she make it at the White House?
No, she made it at one of the reporters' houses that we had at the event in. But anyway, so the president, he came to the dinner, and he had a great time. They had to pull him out. They had to pull him out at 11:30 at night. He didn't want to go. So we were all excited. We could have talked all night, but he had to leave. And that next day was the funeral for John F. Kennedy Jr. And so he definitely had to leave to prepare. But it was interesting. We were on such a high that night, and he still remembers it, because every time I see him, remember our soul food dinner? That's before I had my heart attack. So I said,
Yeah, he's not having any more of those
I
meals.
know. But the crazy thing about it is, when we sat down in his Harlem office for the interview about this book, I said, Mr. President, it was my last question. Why did you have dinner with us? He said, because I liked you and you invited me. And he said, you know, being president, any president, people don't invite you to things anymore. They ask you to speak and come to fundraisers, but they don't ask you for that human interaction. And I was like, wow, that was so telling. And then he said, you know, it felt like home to me. I was like, wow, that blew me away. My heart kind of felt for him. It reached out to him, because it's lonely at the top. So I said, this is interesting, as his wife could possibly be the next president and the first female president of the country.
Well, the next president, President Obama, who you've spent a lot of time with, have you had a meal with him?
Yes, we did. I did have a meal with him, but it wasn't on this kind of level. It wasn't soul food, but it was off the record. And I've had off the records with this president, with white reporters, white radio reporters, OTRs with that, and also with the black media. Each time, you always want to get a sense of where the president's head is at each time, each moment that he brings us together. President Obama is a very interesting man. I feel his culture. I feel him as a black man more so now. Getting to know him.
In the second administration?
Second term, fourth quarter, yes. Right. Versus first term, he was the president who happened to be black. Now he's the black president. He is the president who is black. So, but he's still, no matter what, the president of all America. But there is more of a focus now on African Americans that was not really there at the very beginning of his term as president.
In the book, you talk about specialty media. And it's interesting that it's a separate group. I want to say subgroup. I don't know if that's fair.
It is a subgroup.
Can you talk about...
We're the bastard children.
Tell us about it.
In specialty media, I like to say that we're the bastard children, because we are at the bottom rung of that reporting pyramid. It's the wires, TV, newspapers, and then radio. And then there's specialty media, which is also at the very bottom. And when I say specialty media, it's urban America-focused media, it's Latino-focused media, it's black-focused media, and not only that, it's also LGBT-focused media, it's Christian-focused media. It's all of these specialty groups that don't make the front 2 rows of the White House.
Is that for this presidency or all of them?
All of them. I mean, I even talked to Marlon Fitzwater, one of the greatest press secretaries that there is. He said, you know, it has to be that way, because when you want to put a message out, you have to get the biggest bang for your buck, basically. And sometimes that is, you know, your major news operations. But then you do have the specialty media that can play a big role.
When you first started getting called on in press conferences, you wrote in your book that other correspondents came to you and said, that's because you're black, that's why you were picked on.
It might have been, but you know, there's one thing that really stands out in my mind, and it kind of made me feel okay with it. Ken Strickland, the Washington bureau chief of NBC, said you have to use what works for you to get what you need here in Washington. And if it was because I'm black, so be it. If it's because I'm a woman, so be it. If it's because it's about urban America, so be it. Everyone else would do something if it was to their advantage.
Well, when I read it, I thought, well, it's not that he's a racist bastard. He's just mad that you got the question. Is
How
it
about that?
competition?
Oh, it's professional competition, and then there's a piece of ego. How dare she get something before me? So in this business, ego drives us in a lot of ways, but it's also that professional competition. And also in this business, you're only known for your last story, and if you didn't get the interview with the president, she got it. Oh boy, I got to step up my game. So there's professional competition, and yeah, there may be a little bit of race in it as well.
And that's to today.
That's to today.
Do you feel more pressure covering an African American president?
At first I did, because I don't care if you're black, white, or a woman. I will ask the questions of you like I would any other person. And yes, I am an African American. Yes, I did mark the fact that the President of the United States is just like me. But as a reporter, I have to hold him accountable. And I got a lot of pushback from a lot of African Americans at the beginning who thought I didn't like him. I said, no, it's not the fact that I didn't like him. I have to do a job. And I remember having conversations with friends who told me that you have to be careful in how you ask questions, because people are going to think you hate Obama. I don't hate Obama. I don't hate Bush. I don't hate Clinton. I am true to who I've been. And the unfortunate thing is you have a lot of people who just started watching the news more so now with Obama coming in to office than they did before. I've been there for 18 years, and I've done the same thing with Clinton, I've done the same thing with Bush, and I've done the same thing with Obama. And one thing Clinton said, he said, you know, you get me in trouble because you ask questions that we don't necessarily know what you're going to ask, and it's hard to find an answer for. So they're not necessarily prepared for me. So I don't give President Obama a different spin or give him a different shot or give him a pass because he's African American. He's the President of the United States, and I ask him the questions that I would ask any other president.
So you're in the press room, you're in the middle of a press conference, you're live all around the world. And Robert Gibbs, when he was the president's press secretary, takes you on.
He did. He took me on, all right. This is the thing that people have to understand. As a reporter and someone who's been at the White House for almost 2 decades, you kind of know the rhythms of the White House, what happens and what's supposed to happen, what didn't happen, because you've covered it. You see it intimately or you've covered it. And I've been a guest of state dinners since the Clinton years, and I've also covered state dinners since the Clinton years. And typically there are several layers of protection. One layer wasn't there. The stars of reality show, the Housewives of D.C. on Bravo, the Salahis, the husband and wife team, found their way some kind of way into the line to get into the White House. It seemed like it was pre-planned because they came up with this elaborate kind of discussion as to how they were allegedly invited, and they got this email and what have you. But either way, they never received a formal hard copy that the White House gives for an invitation for an event.
Then this was a state dinner.
For the state dinner, one of the most formal events at the White House, and one of the most supposedly secured events at the White House. So they get into the line, Secret Service looks, they did not see their name, and they said, oh, well, go to the next post, she may have your name. She didn't have the name. Normally there's a second layer of checks and balances at the gates, meaning the social secretary is there with them to check the names off. They were not there. So the Salahis are able to wheel and deal into the White House. They get into the picture line. And this is the crazy thing. They're in the picture line, and typically the checks and balances just did not work that night. Typically when you are in the photo line, you are given a card to say your name, and so it can be announced to the president who you are. They, I'm told, gave their business cards out. So it was pretty bad. So then I'm questioning about all of this. And I have Admiral Roshan, the first African-American chief usher, talking about this, what happened that night in the book, The Presidency in Black and White. And I'm asking all of these questions of Robert Gibbs, and it just crescendoed that day. I asked the questions that people were throwing to me inside of the building, inside of the White House, sources who were close to the scenario, people outside of the White House who were close to the situation. And I got pushback because within the Obama administration, there's a thing called loyalty. And Gibbs and I, it was ugly. And do I wish that it didn't happen? Oh yes, I wish it did.
He took you on publicly though.
He did. I was on the roll, and he told me to calm down, like he would tell his son Ethan. You know, so as an adult who has her own children, that was very condescending. It was very sexist, and it was bad. It was a very bad scenario. We were not getting along in those 2 days on camera. I was asking questions and he didn't want to touch it, and I was asking questions on something that was rubbing salt in a wound for them. Here they had this big breach of security, and who's in the middle of it? Their social secretary, as well as the Secret Service. And the social secretary was a very good friend of the first family. So it's about fixing the situation, damage control, and not revealing too much, I guess, from their perspective. But because of the push and pull and the fact that Gibbs didn't want to give too much, it escalated. And it escalated into a very ugly scene. And
is that embarrassing when it's going on?
Oh yes, it's embarrassing, because whenever you Google my name, that's one thing you'll see. When people tell me, oh, I looked you up, oh, I saw that. So, I mean, that's just something I have to live with. No, but we've gotten beyond that. I hope we've gotten beyond that. We worked together after that. And I have.
Did he apologize?
No, but he asked me to apologize. And I did. But I never wanted it to be perceived that I was attacking anyone. It was about the safety and security of this American president who was getting death threats. It's also about the safety and security of the Indian leader who was there, who had death threats and who had had an attack on him. The bottom line is that that briefing room can be very hostile, but it can also be a good way of successfully questioning and answering on behalf of the American people and on behalf of the president for each side.
I want to ask you about the White House Correspondents' Dinner has become so big because of the access. You've got celebrities who come here. You've got congressmen, reporters talking to people they never get to talk to. It's all about access in Washington.
It definitely is. And it's so bad now that I'm finding it's not just to say I'm in the room. You people are now, and I was sitting on the dais before, people are now walking up to the front, wanting to get the president and the first lady's attention. See, I'm here. I'm like, oh my gosh. It is, I mean, we're getting lines now in the front of the dais. And it is the event of the year. It is the event. I didn't realize how much of an event it was. I mean, I've been going for years. I remember when there were seats where people didn't come. And now it's like, this is the biggest thing since sliced bread. It's access. It is about access, but it's also about being saying, I was there. It increases your Washington power. It increases who you are and your stature in this town by saying, I was a guest. And then who are you a guest of? How did you get your ticket? Oh, I was sitting behind, or I was sitting, oh, the stars of Scandal were here. Oh, I was right behind the person, what's her name? Robin, the Mrs. Underwood, Mrs. Frank Underwood.
Robin,
yeah,
right.
Those kind of things. Oh, and it's not just to be in the room now, it's to be in the room. It's to wave at the president, to let the president know that you're there, okay? Like, you know, I'm seeing people come up, I'm like, oh my God, this is terrible.
Who do you think wins that night? Is it the president because he gets to show his other side? Is it media because we've got the whole world watching?
I think it's the president, because I think that many of the comedians are so nervous that they don't know how to give a joke without stepping on the president's toes, who's right there, but yet they want to make sure that they get enough attention to move their career forward. I think it's a crazy dance that they have to do, and I don't think a lot of the comedians have really gotten it right. And I think the president is so comfortable in his skin, and he knows, I'm not just talking about Obama, but any president, he knows that there's an intimidation factor, so he knows he's going to automatically win. And I think the president laughing about himself is one of the great things. It's our dinner, the White House Correspondents Association, but I think the president ultimately wins that night.
And for the Correspondents Association, how do you think it helps them?
You know, the sad thing about it is people really don't know who we are. It's more, oh, the White House Correspondents Association dinner, but they don't know what the White House Correspondents Association is. They just know about the dinner and the name. But I really wish that people would really find out what the dinner is for and why, the history of it, because it really is about Washington coming together, our sources coming together with us. So it's like a thank you for working with us and helping us, you know, get this story right. It's more of that, I think, than the big glitz and glam. But now our sources want to come because of the glitz and glam, because of the Barbara Streisands and the Kim Kardashians. Yes, she's been there. John Legend has been there. I danced with John Legend. Donna Brazile and I did the bump with John. He was in the middle, and he had to leave. I mean, it's the job is 99% work, but that was like 0.5% fun. So I'm allowed to have that.
Do you worry that your audience that's all across the country looks at you differently from the dinner? I mean, when they see you, well, they're not going to see you. Maybe they are going to see you bumping with John Legend. But do you think they look at us and say, I mean all of us, oh, they're all insiders. They don't really care about us. What are they doing with the person they cover, you know, dancing or drinking?
Well, see, I don't cover John Legend. So I danced to John Legend, so
Okay.
that was just a normal thing. You know how when people have, or associations have their big conference or retreat, this is our retreat, and you are watching us finesse and finagle our sources. You know, it's sad that outside of Washington, people don't understand. But I look at it as our once-a-year conference that we get together and we finally, that's the dinner is the culmination, that's the big night. It is important for us to have this.
Well, it's also a big competition, as you know, between the news organizations to try to get the best guest and most interesting guest and to, you know, be there with them to entice the source. You know, oh, come over and say hi to Robin Wright. And by the way, please be my source on my next story.
Mm-hmm. Again, it increases your stature and your status. The name of this game is who you are, Washington Power. You know, people want to know a name, a brand, and they want to link to that. They want to link to that star. You know, people will link to you, but it's better if your star is shining.
Thank you, April Ryan.
Thank you, Tammy.
For Washington Insider, I'm Tammy Haddad. Thanks for joining us. Please note our program is in no way affiliated with the White House Correspondents Association. Our views are our own. If you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe to our podcast and keep an eye out for more episodes coming soon. Co-executive producer Julie Donofrio and Haddad Media. These programs are produced in conjunction with Simon Marks and the Feature Story News team, including Rob Flynn. Special thanks to White House Photos and the White House Correspondents Association.